Mortal Shell is a game about shells. Unlike turtles, however, you can change your shell to find the one that fits you the best. In today's video, we're going to break down the 4 different shells, what their strengths and weaknesses are, and which shell I recommend. So, let's go. As a very quick side note, it is possible to play the game without a shell at all in kind of like a hard mode. All you need to do is head to a particular shrine near the starting location, accept the punishment, and you're good to go. This will harden your non-shell form, leaving you with a constant low health but high stamina. Now, the first shell we are going to cover is Harros the Vassal. Harros is the first shell that you will get when you enter Fulcrum. Harros is basically your vanilla ice cream flavored shell. He doesn't really excel in any one thing with a balanced durability, stamina, and resolve. However, Harros does have really good survivability, and his main abilities are focused around the game's hardening mechanics. So if you choose to level up Harros, you can expect things like your hardening cooldown being reduced by 25%. Your stamina will regenerate faster when you're hardened. You can reset your hardened cooldown by killing 2 enemies quickly, and your hardening defense will last twice as long once it is broken, allowing you to tank multiple hits. Harros is the first shell you find, and he is definitely one of the easiest to progress with. He's also really good to use to get used to the hardening mechanic, which can save your life many times throughout this game, and you should be using hardening regularly. So if you really like using this mechanic and you want to help get a good flow of when to harden and avoid damage, Harros can be a good choice for that. Next, let's talk about Solomon the Scholar. Solomon is very easy to find. He's near the Grisha boss near the Fulcrum Tower. The Solomon shell has slightly higher durability with a maxed resolve. Resolve is primarily used for your weapon abilities and your tarnished seal abilities like the empowered riposte after you parry. These are the little bars that display above your health bar, and you'll notice that Solomon actually has 6 of them. Solomon's abilities are centered around the maximization of your, is that a word? Maximization? Maximization of your resolve, so that you can use your weapon abilities and those ripostes as much as possible, such as killing an enemy with a empowered riposte has a chance to restore all of your resolve, allowing you to just smash weapon abilities afterwards. Solomon gains a small amount of resolve while being struck when hardened, and much like Harros, Solomon has some good low-level abilities, like when you consume an item, you'll become more quickly familiar with it, and you also gain a glimpse when you read the inscriptions that you find throughout the world for the first time. Solomon also has a survival passive. The duration of time enemies remain hardened when you are separated from Solomon is also increased. This is a good ability to get back in your shell as quick as possible. Solomon is also really good early game, so you can get more familiar with some of the early game items that you'll be using regularly throughout the game, and also getting a glimpse when you read inscriptions, because there are a fair few around the Fulcrum area that you can find. However, the downside here is that Solomon is mostly based around using your resolve, and in the early stages of the game, the only way you can use your resolve is really the empowered riposte. Solomon really shines when you have the different weapon abilities and can spam them during combat. This is really the only major downside to Solomon, especially in the early game, although that is remediated in the later game when you do have all the weapon abilities and all the different weapons, so you can hot swap between them and spam the abilities as you please. The next is Eredrim the Venerable. Eredrim is a little harder to find in the game and can be found at the entrance to this tower. This shell is all about durability, with the max durability but low stamina and resolve. Eredrim is really all about tanking hits and just swinging through them, and has some solid offense and defensive abilities, such as dealing more poise damage, which will stagger enemies more often. This is really a defensive and offensive ability so that you can stagger enemies and just keep on swinging. There are multiple abilities centered around increasing Eredrim's health or taking less damage, and also his own resistance to the stagger. Offensively, Eredrim can gain additional damage after killing an enemy as long as you aren't separated from Eredrim. Eredrim is also good for boss fights and those tough single fights, as he does extra damage to enemies that are alone. So if you are struggling with boss fights, it may be a good idea to level up Eredrim and have a crack at the fight with him. The extra HP and some of these abilities are really good to be able to take on fights when you are struggling with being able to dodge or avoid some kind of damage. Eredrim's abilities are some of the most powerful in the game, but the downside is that he is also the slowest moving shell, and he has a really low stamina and resolve. So while you can take a ton of damage and you can dish it back at a pretty good rate, you do have a low amount of stamina, so you can only swing for a certain amount of time, and obviously there are going to be times when you're going to need to dodge or roll out of the way, and you really want to make sure that you've got enough stamina left for this. And that was the struggle that I had with Eredrim, is that I was mostly focused on attacking, was running out of stamina to roll. This is the big limitation of Eredrim's kit. You can obviously use hardened to avoid some of that damage, and you can take more hits with Eredrim, so it's not a big deal, but I prefer to avoid damage rather than taking it. That's just my own personal preference. Last, but definitely not least, is Tiel the Acolyte. Tiel is a sneaky shell that's a little bit hidden off the main path. You do have to crawl through a little gap to be able to get Tiel and beat the mini boss that's there. Tiel is a light shell with maxed stamina, but extremely low resolve and low durability. Tiel's abilities are primarily centered around doing poison damage to your enemies and also dodging attacks. Tiel has a special shadow dodge that you can do to quickly change direction and sidestep your enemies. I have been using this constantly throughout my playthrough. I personally think that Tiel has one of the best developed kits as well when it comes to abilities. On killing an enemy, Tiel gains a buff which poisons enemies on your hit. You lose this buff when you are hit. Striking an enemy that's poisoned increases the chances that Tiel's other passives will trigger. So things like Tiel's empowered repost ability, where if you do an empowered repost, you will generate a poison cloud around you, which will poison multiple enemies. There's also a 20% chance that when you do take damage, you'll lose stamina rather than HP. These are the kind of abilities that are increased in their chances of proccing when you are striking a poisoned enemy. I've mostly been using Tiel with the hammer and chisel, because these weapons also do poison damage. So you're regularly fighting things that are poisoned, which increases your chance of the passives proccing. So they fit nicely together. The downside of Tiel is that you are basically a glass cannon. Tiel has such low health but really high stamina, so you can zoom around the battlefield. You just got to try and avoid damage. At least the chance to lose stamina rather than health with that ability is beneficial, and I feel like that procs all the time, and I'm assuming it's because I'm always striking poison enemies, but it is worth noting that that is the main weakness to Tiel. It is hard to say what the definitive best shell really is. It does come down to your personal playstyle. For me, it's definitely Tiel. I love dodging and moving around quickly, and I have just been really enjoying the quick playstyle that comes with Tiel. If you do like playing more slow and methodical and tanking a bunch of damage, Eredrim is probably for you. If you like to be flashy, pull off some cool combos, Solomon might be your choice, but honestly, don't sleep on Solomon. He does look kind of boring, like a souped up Harros, but he is actually really good. The weapon abilities are really beneficial. He does have a good amount of health and stamina and is pretty solid all around, but you will want to be using weapon abilities as much as possible if you do go down the Solomon route. And if you're just an average Joe and don't really excel at anything, just like me in real life, you can play as Harros. It's probably the best way to go. The hardening abilities are okay, but there is more cooler things that you can do and do either more damage or be more tanky. He just doesn't really stand out as a shell, in my opinion. Let me know in the comments below who your favorite shell is and why it's obviously Tiel. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and on Twitch. All those links are down in the description down below. Thanks for watching this video. My name is Norza, and I hope you have a great day.